Hey everybody, this is Thigh Company here. Welcome back to the show. For today's episode, we're going into what I call the work series, or like places I used to work or jobs I've had in the past. And this is going to be the first episode, and it is now close to the 8-year anniversary of my first time having a job back in like end of 2014. So uh, first thing I'm going to talk about. So this episode is particularly talking about what it's like working at a movie theater, which was my very first job. Um, I think it was like pretty much end of December of 2014, maybe middle of December. I don't remember exactly when. And throughout the first 3 years, I would say I worked maybe at three different companies. Uh, First place I worked at was the same building, essentially the same staff, um, from 2014 to 2017. And this company was about maybe 5 minute drive from my house, and it was probably much an okay first time job, I think. But they did pay minimum wage, so that's 7.25 an hour. Oh, hey, Umain, welcome, Umain. I'm working at school for free. What do you mean working at school for free? Um, so yeah, pretty much what was it like getting the job? Um, I think at that time I had just finished high school and I was doing pretty much like door to door knocking, or going to each business asking if they're hiring, asking if I could apply, and that was kind of a miserable experience. Every single business saying, "Oh, we're not hiring. Oh, we don't need you." I even remember going to McDonald's and they were like, "Oh, why don't you have a resume with you?" And at that point, it didn't hit me yet that I should have, had a physical resume with me to turn in. A lot of places nowadays don't even really do that. So I find it kind of weird that they did ask me that at the time, especially for McDonald's. Usually they want you to apply online, but at that point, I remember they gave me a paper application. Some places still give you a paper application that you and pretty much, uh, at that point, it was a weird process. Let's see. Yumain's also asking me, Thai, you got a degree? Yes, I have multiple degrees at this current moment. But I'm talking about, again, coming right out after high school. So pretty much I had my high school degree or diploma, whatever you want to call it, at that time. But I remember the way I got into the movie theater was a guy was walking around on the street, noticed how I was applying everywhere and nobody was really pretty much taking me, and he felt bad for me. So what he did was he knew the general manager at that movie theater, and uh, he pretty much called the GM or the general manager at the movie theater, and they were able to get me into an interview. Let's see. Yumain also is asking, why didn't you do nursing? Nursing makes 70,000 salary. So why didn't I do nursing? One at that current. Let me see. What right after high school? So I think August of 2014 was when I had applied to, or pretty much I should say, got into the first community college, which was like one of the big community colleges here in my city. Um, I got into there, and I think at that point I was kind of like talking to their guidance counselors, and they were talking to me about what programs they had there. And I think what interested me at that point in 2014 was they had some kind of like design program or design degree of some sort. Because I think I was into like video game design, and I mean I pretty much was still into art and drawing and all that back in 2014. Um, what is my dream job? I'm not entirely sure right now. Right now, I would say my dream job is basically being a business owner of something that's successful, um, more or less. So, meaning basically, I'm at a point where I'm financially independent. If that's what that probably would be the best way to answer that question. You mean? Um, so anyway, back to the work stuff. Um, so I had the interview. Interview was a little weird because they were pretty much looking over my resume that I turned in at that time, and I remember it being this weird kind of like drawn out process that, looking back at it now, I think was probably more thorough than what it needed to be, especially for the position I was applying for, pretty much getting into. Um, because they had me as what they call a floor staff team member, with that job. And that interview, the only thing they really were asking me, because I told them that I didn't really have a job before, and this would be my first job, they were not really at all curious about any of the experience in school or anything related to school or my education. The one question they had, was, did I have volunteer experience? So, volunteering, which I know in high school was sort of one of the kind of big things that they were talking about all the time. And in high school, I never wanted to do the volunteering because the idea of working for free was not something that I liked or it was interested in at that time. And so what I ended up doing to answer that question was I came up with what I could come up with at the time, which was, I had, I guess you could say, volunteer experience. I don't know how to exactly put it, but my mom basically, I think during high school, she had paid for um, for me to attend some kind of leadership classes of some sort at the local YMCA. And we did some kind of like work to help feed people during like the winter holidays or something like that. Let's see. And so I kind of came up with this story that, I helped. I don't even know what I called it exactly. So the YMCA, they kind of called it like feeding the homeless is what they called it. I don't know why they called it that. They, nowadays they wouldn't call it that, but essentially it was like helping prepare like dinners for the holidays. And I kind of came up with this story, and I think I kind of like added on my own things, like um, preparing, setting tables, doing this. And so basically giving an example that showed that you did work before. And they took that and they hired me, but again, it was minimum wage, so $7.25 an hour. And yeah, I started in pretty much middle or end of December. And let's see. All right, I'm gonna head out. Go to history, then assembly in 10 minutes. All right. So the actual work, I think they had me scheduled like either mid shifts or evening shifts. The evening shifts was really kind of interesting. It was like 3 to 8 p.m. or maybe it was 3 to 11. Sometimes it was 5 to 11. Kind of mixed shifts. And I remember my very first coworker, which I'm still friends with nowadays. This guy was an okay friend. He wasn't, how to put it. I felt at that time he was more interested in other things like outside of work than actual work, which I understand. Everybody pretty much is at the movie theater. And what I did like was that the movie theater was owned by a local company. It was pretty much based in that state, and they only had, I think, 3 or 4 locations.
Да, позвони.
And
И позвони Захару.
да-да. And
И вылезай, хватит.
я говорю. And another issue was that I don't know what they had me scheduled as, if it was full time or part time, because they always like change my scheduling. I think it was probably a situation where it was part time, but they scheduled you like up to 39 hours or something like that. Some businesses have that kind of practice where they try to get the most out of you for whatever. Nowadays, I don't really see much of that. Usually, if it's part time, it's like 20 hours or less. So that may be like 2, 3 days out of the week. Or if it's full time, they usually schedule you 40 hours. So it's like 5 8-hour shifts. So usually it's like Monday for Friday or something like that. And we had a few different positions, and they basically had me doing everything at the movie theater. The first job that they had me doing, which, I would not do that nowadays, even if with the current pay they are offering, which is more than minimum wage. They call it ushering, but it's really, you're like a janitor and you're cleaning the theaters after they let people out of the movie theater. And they gave you basically a broom and a dustpan, and you basically swept the floors trying to sweep up popcorn, and that was just physically exhausting. But on top of that, you also had to take the trash out of the trash bins and all that, which I remember I didn't like it at that time. Nowadays, I mean, I can certainly do without any issues. The other thing was that, let's see here. Oh, we're getting spam from those. So we had the ushering job. Another issue was that we had like a full-on kitchen in the movie theater, and people were leaving like silverware, plates, bowls, glassware, and you had to be very careful because everything was fragile and everything could break, and that was pretty much kind of problematic. What else has been going on? So, because I remember, some of the team members were lazy. They were just starting to break the glassware and break stuff so they could just chuck it into the trash and not have to deal with it or take it back into the kitchen. We had that happen quite a lot. So yeah, who are my coworkers? The first guy I met was an older guy. I had no clue how old he was, but it was later. We became friends. He was at that time like a movie reviewer or movie critic, and he was also getting paid to review movies. And because he was a worker, he with that local company, they also gave him the ability to watch movies for free, and he was doing that essentially as part of his second job as well. And I don't know how much he was making with that. He never told me, but I think it was probably maybe a couple hundred, maybe a week. I don't know. My second coworker, I can mention his name because he's moved out of the city and state and all that. I'm gonna call him John. John was sort of he was at that time kind of a better friend than the first guy, but John was kind of a little crazy. He liked to be like reckless at times. Like, for example, he was bragging about how he was speeding on the way to work, how they stopped him. One point, he was supposedly caught doing 50 in a school zone, so 50 in a 25-mile per hour area. So he was like arguing about the whole thing and bragging about it. But then he was also talking about what other jobs he was doing. Like, he had a catering business and he liked to cook. So he was talking about how he was, I think, mainly making food for like business groups or companies. So like, like lunches for a group or something. And I don't know what kind of food he was making, but from my understanding, he would be able to cook everything and anything. and he did that, but apparently the whole gig was sort of rare for him to do, and so that's why he was working at the movie theater to, pick up another stream of income. Um, but he was also kind of religious. Some people called him a religious nut. I wouldn't call him that. I think it was just superstitious, maybe. But he thought the movie theater was haunted, that he was hearing spirits in the movie theater. And the funniest thing was that we were cleaning one of the theaters in the back. He turned the lights on, and everybody turns the lights on after everybody has left, so people can see how dirty the movie theater is and clean up the mess. And when he turned the lights on, he for some reason looked at the ceiling, and he thought he saw. Um, he called them like demon footprints. Sometimes they called them dinosaur footprints, but literally, he thought that they were like freaking creatures walking around in a movie theater. And basically what it was is that some construction worker or an installer had muddy or dirty footprints, and they were stepping on the ceiling tiles. And when they put it up, they never bothered to clean the footprints. And he thought that was like, some creature walking around in the theaters, and he was, legitimately thinking that. And so I thought that was a crazy thing. Then he would talk about, he thought there was like floating or flying objects in the movie theater. He would always complain about hearing voices, but that's, to me, is kind of ridiculous. If you have movies playing around, hundreds and if not thousands of people in the movie theater talking and all that, you have a busy kitchen that's doing food orders, and that's absurd. But then he would also go in, and I remember like we still had a few like Halloween movies or horror movies, and he would go in and start like laughing as a clown, or a Joker laugh is what he called it. So we had that as well, which was pretty funny. But then he kind of abruptly left, and we never knew what happened to him. I finally found him on Facebook and was talking to him about it. And he's basically left because he didn't like the GM. And then I think he had a new girlfriend, and they moved up somewhere north. I think Connecticut or maybe Massachusetts. I don't remember. Somewhere up north. And and then after that, I had a lot of people who like I knew maybe were kind of friendly, but they never really bothered to, be friendly or wanted to talk. And a lot of people just kept to themselves, just wanted the whole work day to be over, the shift to be over, and started meeting other people there. We had one guy who I think was mentally handicapped. He would always start talking to himself. His face looked like it was swollen. I don't know if he had maybe Down syndrome or something. I don't know what happened with him. But turns out he was working at that movie theater, basically forever. I think he was working part-time or full-time. I don't know. But all they had him do was clean theaters, and that was it. And apparently he's been doing that for over 30 years, which is crazy to think of. But, there are people who stick to one job, and they do that for their whole life. Then we had another guy named, I think his name was Tom. He used to be a projectionist. So back when movie theaters were shown through a projector, he would be an operator, and basically that was his specialty. But movie theaters, they changed the technology, and so pretty much he lost that occupation. And because you need to still work, he just continued doing ushering or movie theater cleaning, and that's all he did, was just clean theaters. So basically it would be, I think it was usually a team of about 12 people at most. Some days it would be maybe a group of 3 people, depending on how slow the day is. And I think occasionally they would actually send people home if it was too slow, so they would save on man hours, or basically pay for workers. And a lot of movie theaters, I hear, still do that. And we would always get like new people who would come and go. And also had another friend who I remember at movie theater who was friends with the first coworker guy. Um, from my understanding, a lot of people who worked at the movie theater, they would basically rent out an apartment that was right next to the movie theater. They never owned a car, and they would basically share the cheapest room, usually like a one bedroom or a studio. I don't think we have a lot of studios in the area, so I think they had maybe 3 or 4 people renting out a one bedroom apartment, and you know they would do that, and I think each person, or at least at that time, 2014, so rent was a lot cheaper than what it is now. Um, but I know some of these people would work 2 jobs, and they felt comfortable living together in that one bedroom apartment. Um, yeah, because I know this other guy who, yeah, pretty much he worked at the movie theater, but he worked like 2 or 3 positions. He would do the ticket counter or box office. He would also be a cashier and then also clean the theaters, but he wouldn't do anything else. But he also worked at, I think, Domino's, and he was a delivery driver, and that was pretty much all that he did. And then I think he later moved out of the apartment and just moved back in his parents' place and lived with his parents. Um, so yeah, because I remember I was cleaning the movie theaters. Then they had me being like a ticket checker, or I don't know what the name of that is, but basically you would check people's tickets and rip their tickets and then show them where that movie theater room was, or if it was down the hallway on the left, down the hallway on the right. And I remember doing that for many, many months, and I was bored from doing that. Nowadays, I wouldn't care about it at all. I would just sit there patiently. But I remember at that point, I was still young and straight out of high school, and I was impatient. Um, and then I think they slowly got me into doing cashiering, and then the cashier position. Um, I think first they start having you selling tickets at at a small, like when it's not busy, so not the weekends, like middle of the week. Then they have you um, sell popcorn, and you have to make popcorn. You learn how to make popcorn, and then they have you also doing like box office when it gets busier. And I think they had me initially when I was doing box office, they had me work mornings, and then eventually when I was really skilled at that, they had me do evenings. And I know at one point we had a few scandals going around. Like one girl would basically sell discounted tickets, like kids' tickets or student tickets or senior tickets, versus selling adult or full price tickets. And she would pocket the difference because the tickets were even dollar amounts. Um, and I think it was maybe like 10 or 11 bucks for an adult ticket, and then a kid's ticket would be maybe five, because I know Tuesdays we had a deal where it was like $5 Tuesdays, but then she would also do like whatever that difference was. Sometimes it was maybe $7 or $6 for tickets, so that $3 to $5 difference, she would pocket that. But then management would notice that, because if you have hundreds of kids tickets and then very little adult tickets, they start getting suspicious, and then eventually they caught the girl and they fired her. And um, I think that only happened maybe once or twice. We had a few incidents where some coworkers where they got into trouble because they supposedly had taken credit cards of somebody and they used somebody else's credit card supposedly. But they quickly find that out, because people started doing complaints, and there's ways to audit that as well. Um, that pretty much would be like my part one to the movie theater. I'm probably going to make this a second part because I got to talk about more about all the jobs and what it's like working in the kitchen. And it also worked as a bartender and then a bunch of other things. The only thing I haven't done with a movie theater is work management. Right now, I know I'm qualified, maybe even overqualified, possibly, depending on what kind of management it is. But I think one of the issues is that if you want to be a manager at a movie theater, they usually don't, it's not easy to get in sometimes. Like, pretty much, probably end up having to make a part 2 to this. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you all in the next episode. So take care.